Hello, my name is Summer Tingle, and I'll be giving my speech on the causes of the Salem witch trials. Growing up, most of us viewed the Salem witch trials through the lens of Hollywood, and thanks to films such as Hocus Pocus, we viewed it merely as a Halloween spooky tale. Based on facts and evidence, the Salem witch trials is far from just a spooky tale that we rehash every Halloween. It is instead a part of our colonial history and resulted in the death of 19 innocent lives. As a child, I loved Halloween movies and still do. Since the Salem witch trials often made their way to be the topic and plot of most Halloween movies, I found myself fascinated with the trials from a young age and often found myself drawn to YouTube videos and articles surrounding the topic. The Salem witch trials were a series of executions of accused witches. The trials took place in the spring of 1692 in Salem Village, Massachusetts. Innocent women were accused of witchcraft and brought to trial for their crimes. But why? What brought civilians of Salem Village to accuse women of witchcraft without any evidence? Looking back, the 19 women executed in the Salem witch trials were not witches, but were instead victims of the result of mass hysteria, anticipated anxiety, and internal civilian conflict. Even though the Salem witch trials happened centuries ago, it still holds mass significance in American history. It shows how a just trial and legal system is important. The persecutions were the result of an unstructured and unfair legal system and convicted accused individuals based on no evidence, and this resulted in the death and incarceration of many innocent civilians. The events surrounding those trials really highlight the significance of the famous American court phrase, innocent until proven guilty. Mass hysteria and chaos in Salem Village was the main contributor to the events of the trials. In Salem Village, a circulating sickness stimulated strange behavior and outbursts in children and women, which led to beliefs of them being bewitched. Children of the Putnam family, which was a very influential family in Salem Village, began behaving strangely and having random outbursts. They complained of having biting and pinching sensations. Soon, many other children and women started exhibiting the same symptoms and behavior. The local Salem Village doctor, William Griggs, couldn't diagnose the source of this strange behavior, and this led to the diagnosis that the Putnam children were bewitched. Others in the village who shared the same symptoms and strange outbursts heard word of this diagnosis, which led to the mass hysteria, and those experiencing this strange behavior are bewitched and are followers of Satan. Modern day science found a reasonable excuse for this strange behavior. The evidence and symptoms of the bewitched point towards argo poisoning, convulsive organism, which is caused by eating bread and cereal made of rye infected with argot poisoning. Argot poisoning. Soon after the hysteria revolving around this strange sickness circulating, accusations against civilians being witches began, which led to the suspicion and resentment towards neighbors and friends in Salem Village. Samuel Parris, who is a member of the Putnam family and father of one of the children diagnosed, demanded to know who bewitched his daughter and niece, Betty and Abigail, and they blamed their slave Tituba for bewitching them. Tituba, along with two other civilians, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, were accused of being witches and were arrested. It was easy for civilians to believe that they were witches because they were considered social outcasts in the community. Good and Osborne claimed to be innocent, but after much harassment, Tituba confessed that she was guilty and claimed that there were 7 other witches present in the village. Tituba confessed in an effort to save herself because she thought that they would keep her alive if she could help identify the other witches in Salem. Tituba claimed that there were more witches in Salem. This led to the mass hysteria and chaos and led to more accusations. Accusations in Salem soon shifted from slaves and outcasts to upstanding women in the community. Soon more than 200 women would be accused of witchcraft. 200 women. Tituba's confession led to a mass witch hunt in Salem and reassured villagers' fear that the devil had infiltrated Salem. And this intensified the hysteria and led to the incarceration and execution of many innocent women. As accusations grew, a special court was made, Court of Oyer and Terminer, to hear cases and address these accusations. Accused witches were kept in dungeons in the jail and chained up to the wall because officers believed that this would keep their bewitched spirit inside the dungeon, and those accused were not provided a lawyer or counsel when questioned. Those convicted were sentenced to death. For example, Bridget Bishop was the first accused witch, who was executed and hanged on June 10, 1692. Later that summer, in July, 5 more accused were hanged, along with Rebecca Nurse. The death of Rebecca Nurse was a major shift in the trials because while the others who were executed were social outcasts, she was a well-respected individual in the community. The mass hysteria fabricated after initial accusations led family and neighbors to go against each other and accuse innocent civilians due to religious anxiety that the devil was in Salem. Along with mass hysteria and circulation, constant anxiety deriving from being in the New World and constant fear of the Native American attacks and devil infiltration led to the events of the Salem witch trials. In 1692, colonial Massachusetts was in constant fear and anticipation of a Native American attack. Due to colonists' constant desire to expand westward and acquire new land, this led to multiple conflicts with the Native Americans. This contributed to the anxiety of impending attacks and constant worry that something is going to happen, which made Salem villagers on edge and victims to paranoia. Salem villagers were all strongly impacted by Native American attacks. For example, King Philip's War happened 20 years prior to the trials, and the war took place really close to Salem. This leads scholars to believe that these Native American wars generated intense anxiety and PTSD in Salem villagers. Along with anxiety revolving around Native American attacks, Salem villagers also feared devil infiltration in the community. Salem Village was a strongly religious community and consisted of Puritans. They feared the devil and thought that the devil would find ways to infiltrate and destroy their lives. Living in isolation in a new world intensified their fears and anxieties, so it was easy to convince villagers that there was evil among them. Villagers believed that witches were associated with the devil, and due to their strong Puritan and religious beliefs, they associated the devil with evil. This belief is the reason why accused witches were executed, because they believed that they were in alliance with the devil. Belief in the supernatural in witches began in the 14th century and became widespread. A recent smallpox epidemic also led to intensified fear and tension in Salem. Many families in colonial Massachusetts were victims and died of smallpox and many other foreign diseases. Villagers dying of strange diseases instilled fear in Salem because by being in the New World, they're exposed to countless unheard of threats, which led them to believe that witchcraft exposure could definitely be a possibility. Fear and anxiety soon turned into hate and suspicion towards family, friends, and even neighbors, which led to the numerous witch accusations. Lastly, internal conflicts within the village, along with hatred and suspicion between one another, led to accusations and execution of accused witches and the trials. Family feuds within Salem, specifically prominent and influential families within the village, like the Putnam family. Evidence shows that many of those accused of witchcraft were known enemies of the Putnam family. The first children to be bewitched were children of the Putnam family, and after this incident, Samuel Parris began accusing individuals they didn't like. Other villagers found accusations a way to deal with and get rid of their enemies. Many accused their enemies and fabricated tales of them associating with Satan. Also, conflicts between villagers are an evident contributor to the events of the trials. Evidence shows that there were many complaints and many land disputes and personal feuds prominent in the Salem village courts. There is a clear correlation between those accused and their role in their community. In the beginning, the people being accused were slaves and social outcasts, so villagers found it easy to accuse outcasts of witchcraft and bewitching others. This shows an obvious divide between social class and how they viewed the lower classes as easier susceptible to the devil. Misogyny also played an obvious role in their role to. Misogyny is also an obvious conflict within the village that led to these accusations. Gender roles at the time of the trials were far different from what they are now. Men held a social Darwinist view that men were superior to women and often viewed men as a superior gender. This stimulated misogyny and hate towards women in the community, and this led to numerous witch accusations towards women. Even though some men were executed in the trials, the majority were women. In conclusion, the Salem witch trials were a devastating tragedy that leaves a horrible precedent in American history. Mass hysteria and paranoia and circulating argot poisoning was the main contributor to these events and prosecutions of the trials. Colonist fear and anxiety towards Native American and Satan attacks also fueled suspicion and chaos in the community. Lastly, family feuds, along with personal feuds and conflicts, led to accusations against women that they were witches. These were the main contributors that led to the dreadful events of the Salem witch trials. So next time you watch a movie or read a book surrounding the events of the trials, you now know that they were in fact not witches, but were victims of the result of hysteria, paranoia, and most importantly, fear.